Audio from 30,000 feet. First off, what kind of board are we dealing with? Truthfully, 90% of the time nowadays in live sound and even on the other spectrum in studio sound, we're switching to digital consoles. Let me break down what that means. What's the difference between an analog and a digital board? Analog board is essentially all the audio travels where it says it's going to go all the time. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but think of an audio console like super bare bones in the sense of you are actually doing something electrically to the sound. A lot of times these look really old. They don't have screens. They don't have any save functions. Nothing like that. Nowadays we use digital consoles which do the same thing, but they give you computer technology basically. It's basically putting a computer inside of the audio world that you're working with. You get save functionalities, you get recall functionalities, you get motorized faders, and it can remember all this stuff because it has actual memory, it has computer components. All the processing is done kind of like a plug-in would on your computer. The audio is not running all these different places other than routing. So it's all happening inside of the computer. That's really the main difference between analog and digital. We don't really use analog anymore. Digital is definitely the way to go. Let's talk about some of the main functions when we're looking at basic audio. You have two real main categories of processing for each individual channel. What's typically going to happen is you're going to have individual mics and inputs come into the board like you would normally do. That's pretty straightforward. Kick comes in one channel, snare comes in another channel, your keys come in another channel. But there are different processes that we can put on those inputs. They get categorized into a couple different groups. One is dynamics processing, the other is like tonality, and the last group is time-based effects. The tonality is really like EQ, and really that can kind of be a class of its own. You can kind of we'll call tonality EQ anyway, and those are all the things that allow you to manipulate specific frequencies on that channel. Dynamics is talking about all the things that manipulate the transients and the level of individual inputs. And then time-based effects are all your reverbs, delays, things that rely on emulating the way sound interacts with the world to help it fit a little better. First, let's talk about EQs. EQs are really the main thing that we use. They'll typically come in a different couple of looks. One is a bunch of different like faders that have different frequency values. The other is what we see a lot more now is like a parametric EQ where you have different bands and you can visually see what you are doing to the waveform of that sound. That is probably the most integral effect or processor that we can put on any sound, and it should theoretically go on almost every sound that comes through your soundboard. And we're looking to use that to make all of the instruments fit together. Meaning, if the guitar, electric guitar, and vocals kind of live in the same frequency range, if I want the vocals to come out more, I might take a little scoop out of that frequency section of the guitar to help the vocals push more. It's kind of like manipulating the levels of the sound at a very fine interval. Next is dynamics. A lot of this is wrapped into compression, and what that does is basically all the sound that comes in, you will set different settings. Compression is basically taking the top ends of sounds and bringing them down, and taking the low ends of sounds and bringing them up, therefore giving you a volume that has a lot less dynamic range. So the volume will not go as high, and it also will not come down as low, to give you a more even sound, because a lot of times you can start to lose stuff in the mix. So if you find an instrument that is kind of some parts of the song or some parts of the track are too loud and some parts are too quiet, and it just feels like it's jumping all over the place in terms of volume, the compressor could be a good option there. So time-based effects are reverbs and delays and other things like that. Those are the two most common ones. Delay will actually repeat the sound. We've seen delays a lot. Sometimes it happens unintentionally, but a lot of times it happens intentionally to make a sound feel longer and fill up the space after the sound. And reverb is emulating what would happen in a room if something feels a little dry. If it feels too close to you or too present sometimes, and we've already EQ'd it, fits in the mix, but it's just too upfront. Reverb is a good way to get it to sit back just a little bit without altering the volume of that. The second aspect of a console or audio that can seem a little confusing is a lot of it is organizational and routing, and we refer to the organization of tracks as really routing, and internally what's happening to make it potentially be more convenient for us, but also there are some tricks that we can use these routing functions to help us and improve our sound. So let's talk about a couple organizational things. You have your main input, which is 1-to-1. Your kick comes in and then it goes out to the mix, and that's it. But you can also create what are called auxes, but really we can look at them as like groups. And it's essentially like taking some of your instruments, like all my drum pieces, if I had kick, snare, and all the mics that are attached to that, I could send them to an aux and essentially group them together and do really whatever I want with them. I can process them all together. I can add EQ or compression or reverb or anything to all of those together. Or sometimes we can use those to send out to other places. If we have another destination like in-ears, or we have monitors on the floor, we can actually take that aux out of the stereo mix and send it somewhere else. So a lot of times that's how we do in-ear monitors on digital consoles, is we will create auxes, which are just groups of certain tracks at certain levels in that group, and send that overall mix to somewhere else. We also have DCAs, which are totally just control and all about organization. So a DCA is going to show up kind of like any other channel, like an aux, like an input, but really all it is control. So for example, on this console, I have a drums DCA that only controls the volume relative of where they're set for all my drums. So kind of like an aux, it groups all these drums together, but instead of being me sending it anywhere or processing anything with it, it just puts all of these, which are my drum tracks over here, on one fader, so that one, I don't lose these positions, but I can turn all of the drums down and it doesn't move any of these. Which is different than linking all of them together, which we could theoretically do on a digital console, but that's a little more advanced. So that's really a DCA. So at the core of it is DCAs and auxes, and we use those to kind of organize things and send things other directions. So to kind of wrap up, again, this is a very, very high level view of what we're looking at. This, as you can see, obviously has a lot of buttons, can do a lot of things. But at the core of it, it works like an analog console where sound starts at the stage, comes into here as individual inputs, and then we use the tools that are on the console to make our mix either better or organize it in a way for other people to use or other things like that. And so obviously this goes way deeper, but at its core, if you can trace kind of like you would do with wires, like if you had wires hanging down from a TV, you didn't know where they go, you would run your finger across it and trace to where it goes to find where it is. It works the same on here. If I wanted to know, like, we've got all these things, if I know the classification of, this says DCA, so I know drums DCA, this is controlling all the drums, and then I can go through all the menus and do all the stuff once you learn all of that and find out. It's a lot easier for us to troubleshoot something that is very complex like this when you know at its core it's only really doing a couple functions like sending, organizing, and processing individual inputs. But if you trace where it starts and you know where you want it to go and you know the tools that you can use, like auxes, like DCAs, we could talk about matrices and other things like that, but at its core, what I've talked about is really all it does, just in a couple different ways.